clearly relevant because we were asking we all say we're in favor of peace, but what does it actually mean? When I was a kid, we used to joke about this when we talked about the Soviet Union. We used to say the Soviet Union wanted peace, piece of this and a piece of that. Remember all that? Well, it turns out that that's still true. The name has changed. We no longer talk about the Soviet Union. But so the word really required a little sussing, a little delving into. And we looked at least two major ways of looking at it, right? Kind of peace through conquering, peace through control, what I called Pax Romana, the Roman way of establishing peace. And I think to some people's surprise, we saw that point of view abundantly represented in the Bible itself. We are very fond and do this appropriately. I'm not being negative about this. Did I say something?
Ignore it.
They're coming at me from every direction. Shall we?
Oh, you want to send that one then?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We are very adept. Is there a couple? Yeah, I think I should be okay. We're adept at what I call curating biblical tradition, curating Jewish tradition, which means that the tradition itself is gargantuan, is huge. I would argue that any position about any subject can find support in the Hebrew Bible, whatever it is. And so we therefore curate what we want to draw out of it that creates our Judaism. And that can even be on a very personal level. My Judaism, you could say. The tradition teaches us to do this in a way by both curating and expanding the tradition at the same time through the Midrash. Right? We saw that last week, where through the Midrash, we find Moses defying God's order to conquer a Canaanite people. And in the Midrash, God acquiescing, oh, you were right, Moses, you taught me something. So you can see how the rabbis of the Midrash were both expanding the tradition and curating a specific point of view that they wanted to promote and to pass forward. Okay, so that's what almost every class in Judaism is doing. That's why you never get tired of it if you just change teachers periodically. Seriously, because everybody looks at this material a little differently. I would say this is true for every great tradition. I don't think that Jewish tradition has cornered the market on this by any stretch. Every tradition does this if it's sufficiently large. Okay, does anybody else have a timer that says it was time to start? Okay, but so this material has been curated based upon what's been going on in recent times in the Jewish world, particularly from an Israel diaspora or diaspora Israel perspective. One of the interesting things about the Hartman Institute, where you now are bored of hearing me talk about, is in the summer, the teachers, some of them are Israel-based and some of them are North American-based. And that often makes a very big difference. Many of us either actively or subconsciously think of Israel as the 51st state, and that the perspectives are really all the same. It's a very big mistake. It's a very big mistake. It's always surprising to me when I meet Israelis who have born Israelis who have chosen to live in the United States and then are surprised that their children are American and not Israeli. And by the way, the reverse happens too. Americans who have chosen to live in Israel and then are surprised when their children are Israelis and not Americans. part of the, and so the perspective is important, what you came from and where you are standing or sitting at the moment. Okay, so this particular teacher, her name is Alana Stein Payne. So I run out.
Yeah.
So Alana is not exactly the kind of teacher that if I was not studying at the Hartman Institute that I would run into. She falls into a certain kind of category. I hope I'm not overstating it. I'm going to describe her a little bit physically, and maybe you'll understand what I mean. She comes from the Orthodox point of perspective, the Orthodox tradition about Orthodoxy in women, where she is, whenever you see her, she's always wearing a man's hat, a fedora. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm.
No.
Right. Yeah, this is, yes, I am Orthodox. I know that married women should have their hair covered. I'm not going to wear a traditional tichel, or I'm not going to wear a traditional, I'm going to wear a hat, just like the men do. So do you follow the kind of statement? Just literally in the way she appears, she is making a statement about sides of her personality. Do we have room here? Okay. About sides of her personality. And it turns out, because I just would not run into this in my normal day-to-day encounters or people that I study with. But she has a point of view that is very, very interesting, and she's very smart, and she's significant in running the adult education program that the Hartman Institute runs in the United States, which is called Hartman America. So like if you want to find it, there are all sorts of things that they do on this side of the Atlantic. Okay, so we're going to look at what she has to say. She wanted the curation of texts that she put together for us. And we're going to start with something maybe a little odd. First of all, I want you to look on the first page that I gave you at number 2. Do we all know who this guy is? Winston Churchill. Okay, now this is from something that he said. And remember what the subject is here. We're talking about alliances and friendships and what makes them different and how we should think about them. This is an actual quote from Churchill. If Hitler invaded hell, I would make at least a favorable reference to the devil in the House of Commons. Let that sink in for a second.
Put it in context.
Well, the context is.
You can come home.
Okay, we have more. You want to pass this? In the midst of the war, what is he saying about alliances?
Well, he's specifically responding to people who couldn't understand how we could have an alliance with Stalin,
Right,
because he was so angry.
right.
With who?
Stalin. With Stalin. You can say the same thing about FDR and Stalin, or from the American point of view, but Churchill had a way of putting things that penetrate and they are succinct. Is the nature of an alliance is just that. It's because each side is getting something that it needs from the other. And so in this case, he would side with hell. Because in his mind, the goal was to defeat Hitler. Now, another way of putting this is he would be willing to get his hands dirty. I want to kind of belabor this for a minute. Because I think it's relevant to several things that are going on today, at least in the Jewish world. I don't think that there's such a thing as an alliance. Maybe, I don't know if there's such a thing as a relationship. Certainly an alliance, where one can avoid getting their hands dirty at all. Now, why am I focusing on this? What I'm about to say may be a little controversial. I don't know. I really don't. And I'm looking back over my career, and maybe what I'm about to say is sort of critical of that career in this regards. I don't know that what I just said has been effectively communicated to Jewish kids as they grow up in Jewish educational circles. We have taught a lot of absolutes about what we stand for. Last week, we talked extensively about peace and justice. And we found that part, once we got past the Pax Romana, we found that part about peace and justice to be pretty easy to talk about. We were real comfortable with that. And we like quoting those texts. And we tend to talk about them in absolute ways. That the Jewish view is justice, absolute justice, in every circumstance, all the time, no exceptions. And the problem when you teach that, I'm reviewing kind of in my mind what I said to kids, what they heard, whether that's what I intended or not, but what they heard is if you don't have a point of view that indicates that every alliance involves, let's be nice, compromise, involves getting your hands dirty, then when you confront the real world, you feel betrayed. And I think for a lot of our young people, they feel betrayed. So that when somebody at university says, you lied to me in religious school, my initial reaction is, no, I didn't. But then if I'm a little more calm and I think about it, what they may have heard were these absolutes. And then when the real world confronts them with the reality of dirty hands in circumstances, imagine saying, I would side with the devil if the devil was with me against him. So I think that this is very relevant to what's going on today. Remember, I said she's talking about things from an American point of view. She lives in New York most of the time. And just to dramatize this difference between being Israeli and American, the way it works, the Beit Midrash at Hartman is just a big room, except there's a small dais where the lecturer sits or stands. It's always interesting to me too, what they choose, who decides to sit and who decides to stand. So Micha Goodman, who we'll look at in the last week, never sits for very long. He's always up and moving around. But other people like Daniel Hartman, he sits the whole time. And you can tell it's kind of the background of how they learn to study. Anyway, she's sitting there and she says, you know, I've been on sabbatical here for the last several months. So I was here during those 12 days. That's the 12-day war with Iran. And she said, I was never so scared. And I actually did a double take. I don't know any Israeli that would say that. Not one that would have said that. Including me as an Israeli citizen. I wasn't, I mean, it was not pleasant. People shooting ballistic missiles and drones at you. That's not exactly, you wake up in the morning and say, I wish somebody would shoot a ballistic missile at me. It's not exactly what you think, but nobody I knew felt petrified. Because Israelis, this is just the way it is. This was a little bit more so than normal, but everybody knew how to behave. Everybody knew more or less how to help each other. But as a New Yorker, who in her entire life had never been in a situation where somebody was shooting at her, she literally would, this was her words, said petrified. Yes.
In all of that, does anybody ask one another or themselves, what if I had to kill somebody? How would I feel?
I think everybody in the military has that. And next, when we get to me, we're gonna actually look at the military code of conduct. And those questions immediately, those are all the questions, they're there.
Because when I thought about my extended family and the two young men who are in the IDF, and one was sent to Gaza, the first thing I said to myself was, oh God, I hope he's gonna be safe. And the second thing I said to
I hope he doesn't
myself,
have to kill somebody.
what if he kills somebody? How will that affect him?
I-
What will that mean for the rest
I
of his
assume we
life?
all know the famous Golda quote. Golda also had certain abilities to sometimes say things in a very pithy way. She said, I can forgive them, meaning the enemy, the Arab, for killing us. What I can't forgive them for is making us kill them.
Making us what?
Making us kill their children.
What I can't forgive them for is them making us kill them. I don't know if those were exactly, I didn't look it up, but that's the gist of it, whatever. it is. Okay, so do we see Winston Churchill here? Let me look at, I want you to look at another version of this, which is from Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Do we know who Menachem Mendel is? Hence, every Chabad family, if they have a male child, has a child named Menachem Mendel. Sometimes Mendel Menachem. Everybody you know his name is Mendy. That's this, Mendel. Okay. So I'm gonna read this. And I just want you to see, remember, we're talking about a guy coming purely out of the tradition now, not Winston Churchill. And a very important guy in Jewish history. Yeah, he had a PhD. He actually had a PhD in engineering. He had no intention to be the Rabbi when he first married into the family. It came to him through circumstances, which he managed to do some amazing things. But such is not the way of Torah, and notwithstanding any past mistakes, Torah bids us to be grateful, to acknowledge those good things which were done. In the eyes of Torah, to be an ingrate is a despicable thing, unworthy of any decent human being. Gee. Wonder who would benefit from reading this. And in the past administration, the outstanding achievement was the prevention of war. He's talking about Jimmy Carter. 1981, right? The past administration. There were instances in the past 4 years which, but for the endeavors of the president, could easily have led to war. Not only did he thus save millions of Americans from the horrors of such a consequence, but in all probability the rest of the world, and for this he deserves our thanks and gratitude. I think that that's sort of just straightforward. Nobody here has a problem with this, right? Now, why is it sort of outstanding? Why is this interesting? A short note of caution is in order here. The above acknowledgement is in no way to be construed as a retraction from my previous stand concerning the Camp David Accords, which he was opposed to. I reiterate as strongly as possible that it was and remains a disaster and a peril for Jews and the rest of the world. The president's part in the Accords was, no doubt, motivated by the hope that it would bring peace, and for this he is to be commended. But the fact remains that all that has been achieved is that one side has made numerous concessions, including giving up land and essential oil supplies for no substantive return whatsoever. Such concessions merely prompt demands for further concessions, creating an ever greater danger to peace. This could have been written yesterday by people in the Israeli government, and in different words, has been. To return to our main point, notwithstanding any errors made, we are enjoined by Torah to express gratitude where credit is due. This is a man who safeguarded the well-being of millions of Americans, and to him, we duly express our gratitude. Again, I think this is exactly on point to our circumstances today. He's talking about the Camp David Accords. What happened with the Camp David Accords? Okay, so it depends on how you want to look at it. So the Camp David Accords at the beginning were all about hope. They were all about hope. When they first happened, Rabbi Emeritus of the congregation and I was with at the time said to me, finally the problem is solved.
No, that was what, 96?
That was 96, that's right. That was 96. Camp David is, you can see it's all jumbled in my head. What are we talking about initially here? Jimmy Carter, I was confusing Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton. Jimmy Carter,
Southern accents.
That's the
Arkansas, Georgia. What happened? The peace with Egypt. Sadat had come to the Knesset late 78, if I'm remembering right. Now I don't trust anything I remember. And the Camp David Accords are 79. Okay, let's just take a minute on this. How would you evaluate the Camp David Accords? The peace with Egypt. 1979. It is 2025. I would argue that that peace has held through the first Lebanon War, through the second Lebanon War, through the first Intifada, through the second Intifada, through the last 2 years, and it's not exactly a warm peace. I'm not sure that I am all that comfortable even using the word peace beyond the sense that they're not shooting at each other, but there has been a lack of hostilities with Egypt since 1979. Yet the argument that was made, in order to achieve that, we gave up land, the Sinai Peninsula, oil, there are oil reserves in the Sinai, and got nothing in return. Anyway, what he said here is we got nothing in return. In other words, what he is arguing is, first of all, let's give credit where credit is due. Jimmy Carter did some important things, probably saved a lot of lives. It's a mistake for us who differ with him on something very important to not give him credit on something else that he did. Does that sound familiar right now? I don't think that there could be a gulf wider than between me and our current president. I'm sure he's worried about it losing sleep. But we have to acknowledge when something right happens. That's number one. When you're in the line, you have to do this. You have to totally evaluate what went right, what went wrong, what do we give praise for, what do we criticize. And then number two, he is willing to forthrightly, even though he's completely wrong, but to forthrightly offer his criticism where he thinks it's important to do it.
What did he want? What did Schneerson want?
He did not want he didn't want to give up the
How
Sinai.
did he want to give up the sign?
From his perspective, the great victory of the 6-Day War was being undone. Yeah.
I have a cursory question, and I might be wrong on this. I haven't read it anywhere, but I've heard it. Isn't the, like, Schneerson Lubavitch community, didn't they initially not think of Israel as being a land until the Messiah came or something? And so then wasn't there something about that?
It's a little more, what they, within certain ultra-Orthodox circles,
Okay.
It was wrong, Zionism was wrong to insist on returning to the land and establishing the state because we had to wait for the Messiah for that to happen. I honestly don't know enough about the Rebbe
Okay.
to know if that was his original position and he changed, or if it was never his position. Chabad has always been a little different than any of the other Orthodox groups, even any of the other ultra-Orthodox Hasidic groups. So
They send their kids to.
they,
the
like
army.
their kid, a lot of their kids go to the army, they. So I just don't wanna say the wrong thing because I honestly don't know.
Okay. That's why I asked, wasn't sure. 'cause I've heard it.
But your point though is relevant about certain elements within the ultra
Okay.
orthodox, even to this day. Even to this day. Okay, questions about any of that before we go to the third thing? Turn over the page, I wanna look at number 4. Something that probably you have not heard of. Maybe you have, I mean, I had heard of this, but never really thought about it until this past time. Have you heard of the transfer agreement? The Ha'abarata between Nazis and the Jewish agency, which meant between Nazis and Ben Gurion. Let's be very clear. In these years, Ben Gurion and the Jewish agency are interchangeable terms. Pretty much. Okay,
Few others.
so what is the Ha'avara agreement? The transfer was a document signed on August 25th, 33, between Nazi authorities and the Jewish agency. Now, think about this, especially from our perspective, because we know what happened. 33, they didn't know what was going to happen. But they could see very troubling handwriting on the wall. And the Jewish agency in Israel, which is the de facto Jewish government until the state comes into existence, is making a deal with Nazi Germany. What is the deal? The initiative behind the agreement came from the German Jewish businessman. Could he have a more stereotypical name? Sam Cohen. According to the agreement, Jews who wish to emigrate from Germany to Eretz Yisrael were required to sell their property in Germany before they left, deposit their funds in German banks. These funds were then used to purchase German goods, which were exported to Palestine. Upon their arrival, the goods were sold, and the immigrants received part of the proceeds. Turn the page. What is there? Did I copy page 3? Okay, no. Sure, I didn't copy page 3? Okay, that's because it's mostly in Hebrew. What I copied on, what is on page 3 is a copy of an Israeli newspaper that says, Al tigu batransfer. Should be able to get the last one, right? Transfer. Don't touch the transfer. The land of Israel is the only hope for German Jews, and the transfer serves as their only and final lifeline. A powerful poster against those opposing the Ha'avara agreement, which served as the first and crucial means of rescue for German Jews from Nazi persecution. This was printed in Haaretz. You're all familiar with Haaretz? 1933. Okay, now what do you think of this agreement? Remember what I said about getting your hands dirty?
Yeah.
Was it appropriate for the Jewish agency to say we have to do everything, anything to save whatever German Jews we can? 1933, fairly early, right? We're nowhere near 38, you know, right? Nowhere near Kristallnacht, right? But 33, is it appropriate to have done this? To make a deal literally with the devil, according to Winston Churchill? Was that appropriate? Look at that deal too. I liquidate everything I own. I put it in a German bank. The bank buys German products, which is only helping, accelerating the Nazi regime. Then these products are shipped to Israel and sold, and I get some part of it. That was the deal, but I get out.
So they didn't know what was coming, but why were they so desperate for people to leave?
Well, how clear was it in 33?
Yeah, I don't know.
It was-
Sounds like they did.
I think.
I think it was plenty clear. I think it was plenty clear, and there was a lot of people who just didn't want to see it. Again, a little relevant to what is going on.
Mhm.
It saved a lot of lives though, didn't it?
Well, it saved, yeah, significant number of lives, and I would argue, not just their lives, but their children's lives that they had in Israel, and their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, some of whom are in the army now.
It's interesting that there's a book that's, I borrowed from this library many years ago, about.
Did you return it?
Yes, I did. That was about, it was described as being about Jews who did not leave Germany because, and the way it was described was because they felt themselves more German than Jewish or whatever. But actually, they picked 6 people that they focused on, and most of them, there are a couple of exceptions, but most of them were people who were recognizing that things are getting bad for Jews here in Germany, and we're staying here to help them get out, whether through financial things or one of them was Rabbi Leo Beck, who was just there to be supportive, but
He
tried
did,
to
he could
convince
have left.
people. Yeah,
He could have
Convinced
left
people
and
to
he
left.
chose to stay.
but another was somebody who was working for getting people to go to Israel, helping them, so it was like, it wasn't that they were devoted to Germany, it was that they were just doing what they could to help people leave Germany.
So I would boil this down to a kind of simple thing.
The German Jews who went to Israel were in a better position to sound the alarm and
They did.
get people to listen.
Look, I believe that Ben Gurion certainly knew what was going on. I think that we can go back and forth and argue, were they really trying to help other people leave and that's why they stayed? Was that an excuse? Is this, we can go back and forth on all this. I'm influenced by my own experience. Surprise, surprise. I'm influenced by my own experience. And my own experience for the last 10 years in particular has been as an immigrant. And some people here have immigrant in their background, more recently than not. But it's an experience that is difficult under the best of circumstances. I don't think they left because they were at home. I don't think American Jews leave because we are at home. We feel at home. We may be uncomfortable with things that are happening. But that notion of going someplace else where we aren't at home and trying to recapture the feeling and the reality of being at home. Look, Simone and I speak passable Hebrew, I hope. Meaning we can communicate when we have to. And we can watch the news in Hebrew and we can
go to lectures.
we can go to lectures in Hebrew and all the rest. We came with a fair degree.
In Hebrew.
We came with a fair degree of Hebrew fluency. They make you, when you make Aliyah, at least they did 10 years ago, list every time you've been in the country. My case, it was 42 times. Simone's, I think it was 27 or 28. So we'd been there plenty. We had lived there when we were students for a whole academic year. We had been there for whole summers on sabbatical. We had been there for 6 months with our kids on sabbatical. Our kids had been in school for 6 months. If anybody was going to make an easy transition, it should have been us. And I want to tell you, there were plenty of times we were at sea. That if we did not have friends to help us, like I've got this document you're on, what the hell does this mean? I can translate it, but it's all bank jargon. I have no idea if this word that normally means table really means table when we're talking about financial transfers or something like that. Just think about all the stuff that's in English that you sort of know. But even if you don't, even as native English speakers, why do we have to go to lawyers? And there's lawyers in the room, I know. But why do we have to go to lawyers? Because they speak a different language. It looks like English, the party of the first part to it looks like English. Or why is it so difficult? Why is there such a thing as patient advocates? Because they have doctors that speak apparent English that nobody can understand. I used to have to go with my mother when she was going to the doctor because she nodded her head lots, but it was very clear to me that she didn't understand half of what the doctor was saying to her. The doctor was just trying to be precise. But do you follow what? So when you're an immigrant, put that on steroids. You don't understand anything. You don't really understand how the tax system works. You don't really understand how the school system works. You don't understand all of the slang that grows out of the army that a big piece of the population knows because they were in. You don't understand any of the acronyms. Right? Okay, so that was us, and we were able to do this. We were living on retirement. We didn't have to get a job. We didn't have to get our kids in school. None of that kind of stuff. And still there were those moments. So imagine somebody, let's take an extreme case, who comes from Ethiopia, who only knew that in his version of Judaism that he had grown up with in Ethiopia, Jerusalem was literally the promised land. Of course, he wanted to go there. He's stepping out of a different century into the 20th century in the land. Imagine how difficult that is.
But he did it out of volition.
Right.
If you do it out of the preciousness of life and you understand that,
That's
different.
a very big difference. It's very important, but I would argue it doesn't make it easier. So when in the 90s, now I'm getting my dates straight. It takes me a little while to get rolling again. I don't do this very often. In the 90s, 1 million Soviets came to Israel. You'll remember this. A lot of them came to the United States too. It was the raison d'etre of every Jewish federation in the United States for most of the decade of the 90s was resettling the ones who ended up here. I have some fascinating stories about that too that I won't bore you with. Another story for another time. But 1 million in Israel. This was like absorbing 20 to 25% of your population in 10 years. All right, it was incredibly difficult. Every Soviet who came to Israel seemed to be an engineer.
Or a musician.
Or a musician. There were plenty of jokes about this. If you saw a Soviet Jew getting off of the airplane without an instrument, he was either a conductor or a pianist. Because there was some truth to all of this. But they were all engineers, which really meant, and I don't mean this disparagingly, it meant technicians. Okay, some of them came off and were mining engineers. You know how many mines there are in the state of Israel? So they became house cleaners, janitors of one sort or another, guards at grade schools. Now imagine, first of all, they didn't make very much money and they had a lot of difficulty adjusting. But also, just think of what they had to deal with coming from the former Soviet Union to this little Middle Eastern country.
Where it's hot.
Where it's hot, yeah. My point is that immigration is a difficult thing. To pick up on your point, was this a good deal? Would we make this deal? Ha'avara, even though it meant strengthening Hitler.
piece of the pie is better than no pie.
All that I'm saying, I think that if I were to go to, and everybody here said yes, and everybody here said no, I would say, you know what, I think you're right. And you know what, I think you're right too.
It's no good. It's no good.
Because there is no alliance without getting your hands dirty.
I think if it saved lives, it's a good deal.
But the argument would be, was that true on a net basis? Strengthening Hitler, given especially the hindsight that we have. Maybe Hitler doesn't get to 1938 if he's not being propped up by the Jewish money of expats leaving the country.
of course, there's also the thing that if they didn't get propped up by their money, you just come in and take the money the next year by killing people.
Well, that's
or-
what they did.
Yeah, which is ultimately what they did. I
Yes.
mean, I'm just trying to make the point, there's no simple right answer. And once again, to go back to what I started from, I think we have an obligation, particularly for older kids. If I was teaching confirmation now, I would be trying hard to communicate some of this complexity. Okay, let's turn to page 4.
We don't have to.
No, we don't have page 4. What's the next page you have? 5. Okay, 5 is good. 5 is good. Let's look at number 8. All of you are very conversant with Maimonides, I assume? Maimonides is really worth looking at, especially when it's curated. I don't think anybody in this room, including me, is going to sit down and just read Maimonides. It would be a little bit like reading the Encyclopedia Britannica. What I didn't show you, I just didn't include it, is on page 4, is Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, which once upon a time I knew a lot about. And you would, if you compared page 4 and 5, you would see Maimonides 90+% just lifts Aristotle which he does a lot. What Thomas Aquinas did for Catholicism, which was harmonizing Catholicism with the philosopher, who is Aristotle, Maimonides did for Judaism, harmonizing Judaism up to his point with Aristotle. Okay, we ready to look at Maimonides? We don't need to read Aristotle, Maimonides. And there are 3 types of friend. Look at what he says. A friend for utility, a friend for comfort, and a friend for virtue. Indeed, a friend for utility is like the utility of 2 business partners in the friendship of a monarch and their army. Does that make sense? It's completely utilitarian. I don't think I would use the word friend. I would say that's an alliance. I would say that's an association. Whereas the friendship for comfort is of 2 types, the friend for pleasure and the friend for confidence. Indeed, the friend for pleasure is like the friendship of males and females, and similar to it, whereas the friend for confidence is when one has a friend to whom one can confide one's soul. One will not keep anything from that friend, not in action, not in speech. The one will make that friend know all of one's affairs. I don't know that that's ever true, but the good ones and the disgraceful. Do you know what the definition of a secret is? A secret is something that I tell no one. Because if I tell anyone, it won't be a secret anymore. So I don't know that I exactly agree with this, but you get his point. Without fearing from the friend that any loss will come with all this, not from the friend, not from someone else. As when one has such a level of confidence in a person, one finds great enjoyment in their words and in their great friendship. And a friend for virtue is when the desire of both of them and their intentions is for one thing, and that is the good. Aristotle was Plato's student. And each one wants to be helped by their friend in reaching this good for both of them together. And this is the friend which he's commanded to acquire, and it is like the love of the master for the student and the student for the master, which is something from Pirkei Avot. Okay, so what he says there's 3, I think there's essentially 2. What is Maimonides teaching us about his use of the word friend? There are utilitarian friends, and there are true friends. The true friend is a connection soul to soul. You talk. You are not inhibited in terms of sharing. At least that's a goal. The utilitarian friend, that friendship is only as good as the utility. It only lasts as long as the utility. Now, I wanted to talk about this because I think that this is exactly on point again now. We make the mistake of assuming or misjudging utilitarian friendships for real friendships. And when we do, we are sorely disappointed.
Does that
Anybody-
include student and teacher?
It could, I think it could be any relationship. I think it could be any relationship, but I'm thinking right now in terms of group.
Is it kind of like the saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer?
Well, yeah, he doesn't want to go so far as to say, he's not talking about enemies though.
Right, but.
What he's talking about is, look, we all need alliances. This notion, so you need to know this about me. Part of the American myth is something we all grew up with called rugged individualism. That is crap. I'm just gonna say straight out, the whole notion of rugged individualism, of the Marlboro Man, who was Tom Selleck originally in the original cigarette commercial. If you remember that far back, he was very young. All right, that's a myth in both the descriptive and the pejorative sense of the word. The notion that anybody goes it alone. I defy you to give me an example. And everybody needs alliances, whether it's stuff that we inherit, stuff that we create, stuff that we bequeath. Everybody needs alliances. It's a good thing. The problem is when we mistakenly characterize the alliance for something it isn't. All of us know that the NAACP was founded by Jews, right? We all know that. It was actually founded by Jews originally. Lots of things like that. There's a lot of little factoids like that. Did you know the Jewish Theological Seminary was founded by Reformed Jews? It was found. We don't want any of those Eastern Europeans in our seminary down the road here. We're going to create one from New York. We'll stay in their own place. We don't want them messing with us. So Reformed Jews created Jewish Theological Seminary. It was originally an Orthodox seminary. Okay, but the NAACP was created by Jews. Initially, because it understood the importance of the alliance. Problem is the Jewish community was then upset when it turned out only to be an alliance. And as soon as the interests diverged, the thing began to break apart. My perspective on that is, yeah, of course. These people ultimately are going to want to chart their own course and see their own interests and want it to go this way. And you can't claim ownership over this. I think that this is important because for a lot of us, including myself, the last 2 years have challenged this question of who is a friend. We were assuming that because we said nice things to each other, particularly during National Brotherhood Week, or in Temple Israel's case, I know that this is on YouTube, but during Martin Luther King weekend, we assumed that there was something going on that was different than an alliance.
Sometimes people they're not honest about it.
Oh,
They don't say we're doing this because we want this, you do too, so let's work, and so they make it seem like it's not an alliance.
You're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And these things all tie together because once we understand that alliances are good, but they're alliances, then we have to ask ourselves, what compromises, dirty hands, are really willing to do for the alliance? And at what point? No. it's not worth it anymore. The alliance doesn't stand.
You can even take it down to the family level. There were those, they're not in abundance, but there were those parents who never let go of their children.
Not in abundance.
How would you
I've been
define,
away for a while.
Yeah, the over here and then.
what would you define as a non?
As a non-alliance?
Yeah. In life
You mean a
itself.
real friendship? Is that what you're asking? Okay,
Yes.
so I've used this example, I said this at the brunch too. My best friends in Dayton know that every member of this congregation thought I was their best friend. I'm sure that was true. But beyond a doubt, Jack Kepke and Bob Skipper, and when he was still here, Rod were my best friends in Dayton. This was based on friendship, it started out as an alliance. We were brought together by Miami Valley Hospital almost within hours of my arriving here. Almost hours with Rod, but we came at the same time, within a month of each other. Because the hospital thought it would be a good thing for what they called senior members of the clergy. That was me and Jack. I was 53 at the time, but senior members of the clergy and Rod, all that more or less in. Jack was in Oakwood, but more or less here in center town, and they thought that it would be helpful to them at the hospital, so they brought us together. Jack and I were on the board of the hospital. Rod was on the foundation board of the hospital. You can see that that was all utility, but over the course of years, it developed into true friendship, meaning we were no longer interested in what we were bringing to the table for the others. It was just about human to human contact. It's rare, I think. It doesn't happen very, very frequently. You know, what's the difference between a marriage of utility and a real marriage? Right? It's along those lines. And, you know, I feel like, which was the Supreme Court justice that he said about obscenity, that he couldn't define it, but he knew it when he saw it, right? Potter Stewart. Did he say that? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's something along those lines. But mostly what I'm focusing on is not the true friendship side, although that's plenty interesting. I'm focusing on the alliance side because I think that the Jewish community to this moment is feeling betrayed by elements that it thought were friends that were compatriots, that were alliances. I think to some extent that's what's going on in New York City right now. And again, this is one of those complications. This is one of those subtleties that are very, very hard to communicate, which is why we don't do it with our kids. Because it's hard enough to do adult to adult, let alone try to explain this kind of subtlety to somebody who is young without having had a sufficient experience.
But it takes them forever.
Yeah, it could. Okay, we ready to go a little further? Because we're going to run out of time here. Number 9, which is on page 6, is a long passage. But I want to at least get to that. The rest of these things you could read on your own or in English. Okay, this comes from Avodah Zarah. Now, I have been studying Avodah Zarah for about the last 8 months with my Chicago Rabbinic colleagues who we've been studying. When we lived in Chicago, we studied together and then everybody moved apart. And then because of COVID and Zoom, we were able to reestablish the group. That's what I was doing this morning. I was studying Avodah Zarah, but we were up to page 38, not on page 10. But this is a long passage. It's a story. It's a little weird. That's the way they always are in the Talmud. But let's see if we can unpack it a little bit and see what you think. And if you disagree with me, you can come to Tina's Talmud class and she'll fix it.
I'm sure we'll clear it out.
Okay. So Antonius said to Rabbi, who's Antonius? He's the Caesar. And when it says just Rabbi, capital R, we're talking about Judah Hanasi, Judah the prince, the compiler of the Mishnah. He's always Rabbi. The rabbi, always, just like in medieval documents, if you hear the philosopher, that's Aristotle. If you hear the rabbi, it's Judah Hanasi. Okay, so he said to, obviously they have a relationship. That's why I'm bringing it. So the question is, what kind of relationship? It is my desire that my son Asveras should reign instead of me, and that Tiberias should be declared a colony. Some of you have been to Tiberias, the city, in the Galilee, right? Named for Tiberias. Were I to ask one of these things, it would be granted, while both would not be granted. In other words, Rabbi, I have a problem. I have two goals. I don't think I can do both. Rabbi thereupon brought a man, and having made him ride on the shoulders of another, because he always believes in visual aids, as opposed to just saying what he is thinking, handed him a dove, bidding the one who carried him to order the one on his shoulders to liberate it. And sitting on his shoulders, hands the one at the bottom, a dove, said, hand this up to the one above you, he'll liberate it. The emperor perceived this to mean that he was being advised to ask the Senate to appoint his son Asveras to reign in his stead, and that subsequently he might get Asveras to make Tiberias a free colony. In other words, how do you get both when you can only get one, when you have a stubborn Congress, a stubborn Senate? I don't think this has anything to do with today. A stubborn Senate that just won't let you do what needs to be done. Okay? Right? You appoint your son, you get your son to do it. One step at a time. Okay. Antonius, now we have the basis of the relationship. Do we see how this works? Judah Hanasi is kind of the emperor's advisor. Now, I didn't say that this was real. I can't tell you that this is historical. But there's lots of stories of emperors having a relationship with rabbis and seeking rabbis' advice. I think it comes from rabbis having absolutely no power at all, so they imagine themselves as being in positions of influence. That's my guess. Antonius had a cave, which led from his house to the house of Rabbi Judah. Every time he visited the rabbi, which apparently he doesn't want people to know about.
The cave goes from Rome.
Yeah, this is a hell of a cave. It goes all the way underneath the Mediterranean, all the way to the land of Israel. Right? When the rabbis are talking about a cave, it's a cave, it's a real cave. Okay? So the Caesar would bring two slaves, one of which he slew at the door of the rabbi's house, and the other, who he had left behind, was killed at the door of his own house. In other words, he needs protection. But he doesn't want them blabbing the definition of a secret. Okay? And so he kills one at the rabbi's house after that's taken care of, and he kills the other one once he gets home. Said Antonius to Rabbi, when I call, let none be found with thee. No one should be there because the secret is a secret, right? One day he found Rabbi Hanina ben Kama sitting there, which means, did Judah Hanasi follow the rule? No, he's got a buddy there when the emperor shows up.
Is that he let him know that he was coming, which would involve some means of communication that somebody would know about it, right?
If you can have a cave like this, you can have communication like this. Don't get twisted up in reality. This is the rabbinic story in the Talmud. Okay. And so the emperor said, did I not tell you no man should be found with you at the time when I call? And Rabbi replied, this is not an ordinary human being. Then said Antonius, let him tell the servant who is sleeping outside the door to come in. the servant outside the door is dead. Hanina ben Chama thereupon went out, but found that the man had been slain. Thought he, how do I act now? Shall I call and say that the man is dead? But one should not bring a sad report. Shall I leave him and walk away? In other words, do I tell the truth or do I run away? Okay, that would be slighting the king, running away. So he prayed for mercy for the man, and the man was restored to life. He then set him in. Okay, and Antonius said, Antonius, I am well aware that the least one among you can bring the dead to life. Still, when I call, let no one be found with you. Why is Antonius having this relationship with Eutychus?
Obviously, he feels the advice he gets from him is worth it, but he doesn't want anybody to know that he's getting the advice from him.
That's true, but more than that. What did he just say here?
Oh,
He wants
you're
to know
dead.
that.
Rabbis can bring dead people back to life. Hallelujah. We'd start with ourselves. However, I mean, he's saying, you guys have great secret power. So therefore, I want to have a relationship with you. Your advice matters, but I don't want anybody to know about this because then they'll know you're the power, not me. Every time he called, he used to attend on Rabbi. What does that mean, attend on him? And wait on him with food and drink. When Rabbi wanted to get on his bed, remember, we're talking about the emperor here. Antonius crouched in front of it saying, get on your bed by stepping on me. Rabbi, however, said, it's not a proper thing to treat a king so slightly. Whereupon Antonius said, would that I served as a mattress unto thee in the world to come.
Yeah.
You know how to get into the afterlife. You think I'm going to get a little thing like my pride in the way of you helping me get into the afterlife? Once he asked them, shall I enter the world to come? Yes, said Rabbi. What else would you say to the emperor? Absolutely not. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Look at your slave out there outside the door. Are you getting it? Yeah. But, said Antonius, is it not written? There will be no remnant from the house of Esau. Right? Do we get that? This is a pun. Esau's other name is Edom. And Edom is code for Rome. So if it says there will not be a remnant of Esau, it means nobody from Rome lives in the big picture. That, he replied, this is now the Rabbi, applies only to those whose evil deeds are like those of Esau. Who's convinced? Yehuda Hanasi is dealing with the emperor of Rome, who asks him, do I have a share in the world to come? The prudent thing to say, this is an alliance. Sure, but I know a verse that says, isn't that interesting? The emperor of Rome knows a verse from the Torah that says he won't get in. So what does Yudanasi say? No, that only applies to people like Esau. In other words, I know you're not getting in. Am I going to say you're not getting in? No, that would be stupid. You kill me. I would be of no use to you anymore. Now a little side story, which you may know. I told this at Share Shabbats at least 2 or 3 times during the course of that. Onkelos converted to Judaism. Do you remember this story, Onkelos? The Roman emperor sent a troop of Roman soldiers to seize him and bring him to the emperor. Onkelos drew them towards him with verses that he cited and learned with them, and they converted. You don't remember this story? This is one of the great stories. The emperor then sent another troop of Roman soldiers after him and said to them, don't say anything to him. Do not engage. Just get him. So that he cannot convince you with his arguments, the troops followed the instructions and took Onkelos with them. When they were walking, Onkelos said to the troops, on his own, I will say a mere statement to you. A minor official holds a torch before a high official. The high official holds a torch for a duke. the duke for a governor, the governor for a ruler. Does the ruler hold a torch before the common people? And the soldiers said to Onkelos, no. And Onkelos said to them, yet the Holy One holds a torch before the Jewish people, as it is written, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud and led them by way at night in a pillar of fire to give them light. And they converted. Who has power in this relationship? The emperor then sent another troop of soldiers after him. This is third troop. Probably this was F troop. Sent the third group of soldiers after him to bring Onkelos and said to them, do not converse with him at all. The troops followed this instruction and took Onkelos with them. While they grabbed him and were walking, Onkelos saw a mezuzah that was placed on the doorway. He placed his hand upon it and said to the soldiers, what's this? They said to him, you tell us. He's a very clever guy. Onkelos said to them, the standard practice throughout the world is that a king of flesh and blood sits inside his palace. The servants stand guard protecting him. But with regard to the Holy One, God's servants, the Jewish people, sit inside their homes, and God guards over them outside. As it is stated, the Lord shall guard your going out and your coming in from now and forever. Upon hearing this, those soldiers converted to Judaism. At that point, the emperor sent no more soldiers after him. You like that story? You gonna remember? Onkelos is the convert who translated a big part of the Bible into Aramaic with a commentary. He becomes one of the truly important figures in the rabbinic tradition itself. The Gemara returns. Now we've had our little comic relief. So the Gemara returns to the discussion of Antonia. When the matriarch Rebecca was pregnant with Jacob and Esau, the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. Rabbi Yehuda said that Rav says, do not read it as goyim, nations, meaning nations, rather read it as geim, meaning proud ones. This verse was fulfilled in 2 prominent individuals who descended from Rebecca. Now, normally we think of that, who descended from Rebecca? Jacob and Esau. We think that that's who this applies to. But no, not in the Gemara. The Gemara says it's Antoninus and Yehuda Anasi, whose tables, due to their wealth, never lacked for lettuce, nor cucumbers, nor radish, neither in the summer nor in the rainy season, despite the fact that these foods do not grow year-round. The reason, of course, how would Jews measure wealth? Radishes all year round, even when they're not in season. There's certain stereotypes that just jump up. The reason they ensured that these items were always present at their tables is that the master said a radish breaks up food, lettuce stirs up food, and cucumbers expand the intestines. This stuff is good for you. Now, that's okay. That's the end of that story. Now, why are we looking at it here at 10 minutes after? Why are we looking at it? Okay, because I think it's clearly an alliance and not a friendship. Does anybody disagree with that? What is the basis? What are they getting from each other? So I think from the Jewish side, it's fairly obvious. Yehuda Nasi is getting from the emperor a kind of protection. He's friends with the emperor, right? He has access to the emperor. Access is very important, as we now know. If we had any doubts about this before the last 10 months, certainly we shouldn't have, because we've always known how important access is, because access means influence. In this case, influence means safety for not just him, but for his people. I want to try to tie some things together. What does Yehuda Nasi have to do to maintain this alliance, to maintain this access, to maintain this influence? What does he have to do?
He's putting up with stuff that is morally reprehensible, such as the killing of the servants, just as an
murder, regular murder on his own doorstep. And he chooses not to end the alliance. We say that's dirty hands?
Like, how is there trust with any of this, then, if you don't, if it's not truly, I mean, do you trust the other individuals, there's always some.
All right, so let's ask this in both directions. Does Yudanasi trust Antoninus? I think the answer is clearly no.
Right.
How do I know that? Am I getting into the World Cup?
Okay.
Absolutely. Sure, whatever you want to hear, whatever you want to hear, Antoninus. Right? And pushes him away with what the rabbis call a bent reed. With, oh no, that verse doesn't apply to you. It only applies to people like Esau. As if you're not like Esau. Right? Okay? I mean, you're murdering your own servants right in front of me. He's clearly like Esau, or worse. I mean, the worst version of Esau, the rabbinic version of Esau, not the biblical version. Okay? So from his point of view, I don't think there's any trust at all. His point of view is this is completely utilitarian relationship. I'm the leader of my people. I have responsibility to protect my people. This is the best way to do it. This is making a deal with the devil against Hitler. Okay, what about the other way around? Does Antonius have any trust in Yehuda Nasi? I would go so far as to say he has a kind of faith in Yehuda Nasi. Oh, sure, your friend brought this guy back to life. Why is that little interlude included? It's so that the emperor can say, oh, I know you guys can bring people back to life. You have a kind of power I can never have. Your power really matters. You could bring me back to life. By the way, you could guarantee that I have eternal life. Am I getting into the world to come? So from his perspective, I think he has more, I don't even think we'd use the word trust. I think we'd use the word faith in terms of who Yehuda Nasi is. And I think Yehuda Nasi understands this. I'm going to give, I hope, Yehuda Nasi credit and say he's not believing his own publicity. And he understands that the source of his power is what Antoninus believes about him. And so he's not going to eliminate that, but I don't think he believed it about himself. Okay. And so therefore, he's exploiting the utility of the relationship. Is there anything wrong with exploiting the utility of the relationship?
Maybe.
I guess that depends on the level of the exploitation.
And the necessity of it.
And the necessity of it.
And what is the goal? What is the goal? Rome, if you were on the wrong side of Rome, remember the rabbis are living all of this, the Talmud. This, I don't know when this story is written down. It's about Yehuda Nasi, who puts together the mission at the end of the 2nd century. So he's generally considered early, meaning he's a Tannaitic, is at the end of the Tannaitic rabbis, the first couple century, maybe the last century before the Common Era and the first couple centuries of the Common Era. But I don't know when this story is told about him. It is a little dramatic effect. It is written down. Yeah, it's written down in the Talmud, which is codified, let's say, in the 6th century. Okay, so this story has been around at least 1400 years, but maybe longer, maybe not. No, from the 6th century to the 20th century. Okay? You only get one correction that works per class. Okay? So my point is, I don't know when this was written down, so I can't tell you the context, but within, for sure, but within the tradition, we see somebody defending his people against the Romans, who are the big bad of their time. I don't want to say the Romans are the Nazis, but in terms of their role to the Jews, this is the big bad. So He's literally doing what Churchill said at the beginning. In a very complex, subtle way. Exploiting, by the way, Yudah HaNasi is completely powerless against Rome. What happened in the first Jewish rebellion, the Great Jewish Rebellion of 67 to 70? Romans completely destroy them. What happens in the second rebellion, the Bar Kokhba rebellion, 132 to 135, if memory serves, around that time? Completely destroyed. I read in the Times in Israel that they now think there was a minor third rebellion that happened not in Galilee, but more around the outskirts of Jerusalem. Complete destruction. It doesn't pay to go up against Rome. You get destroyed. So his only power is the perception in Antonius's brain, which he exploits. Okay.
So getting back to young people, and you get comments back, you know, what they've been taught in Judaism or what they've taught in religious school throughout the years or what they learned from us. Every life has value, and you know, Judaism likes to hold themselves more accountable than others, and that's the reference and the lens that they're looking at some of the things that are going on, and so it's a little bit skewed. So how do you?
So I don't think it's skewed. I think it's incomplete. So what you just said is true. Did any of us disagree with that? The basis of my Judaism, and this is partly why I can be friends with the people that I'm friends with, the basis of their Christianity is that everybody is created in the image of God, that we have more in common than what separates us, that there is a spark of divinity and a pure humanity, which we all have in common. Does any of us disagree with that? I don't think there's anybody here that disagrees with this. I should let Joel talk before I move on. All right. But and I really don't think anybody disagrees with it. But it's incomplete to only say that, because the real world requires dirty hands sometimes. Otherwise, you just die.
But you,
That's the, and this is, I don't know how to teach, you can't teach this to a 6-year-old.
okay.
If you're only
How about to a
Judaism,
20-year-old?
so if you're only,
Or
if,
more.
even your little one is now old, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
yeah, my memory of you is being pregnant all the time and having
That's
a little
my
baby
memory
all the
too.
time. I'm assuming you're not pregnant now. But all kidding aside, if your Judaism is the golden book version of Judaism, people are going to be disappointed, because when you grow up, everybody ultimately finds out that this is what I called it last week when I talked about utopianism. And I said utopianism is good if it helps us understand what the goal is. But it doesn't tell us how to get to the goal. It doesn't tell us the complications, the dirty hands, the difficulties of getting to the goal. And when we teach the golden book version of Judaism, we're only talking about the utopian stuff.
How, in religious school, for instance, how do we explain Gaza to ninth graders?
All right, so I can only tell you what I did. And this was me then, but throughout my career, I felt this was, and some of you heard me say this, that we were guilty of teaching pediatric Judaism. Right? You remember this was one of my phrases, like I had certain phrases. My whole rabbinic could be boiled down to half a dozen things that I need to say, that I said all the time. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't, you know, there were certain things that I was always saying. And if Karen was sitting here, she'd go on quoting them, because for 12 years she heard them on Nazi. All right, anyway, it's to her credit that she didn't just go insane. Anyhow, but another one was pediatric Judaism. So when I was teaching confirmation class, I tried to teach a much more adult version of Judaism, and I did that by teaching, among other things, 20th century Jewish philosophers who had sophisticated things to say. And one of the people that I taught was Richard Rubinstein. Some of you who are in my adult Bar and Bat Mitzvah classes will remember this, who argued that the traditional God of Judaism died in the Holocaust, because the traditional God of Judaism would never allow what happened to have happened, which is a very sophisticated kind of idea. And it was a challenging idea that certainly none of the students had ever heard.
Really?
For sure,
Because
14 and 15-year-old kids, why would they?
They might have got it from the parents.
I never heard, I mean, I didn't.
And so it wasn't just, there were other sophisticated ideas. So my attempt was, because I am enamored of philosophy and ideas, that by teaching more sophisticated ideas, I could communicate a more sophisticated version of Judaism. Probably to some extent that was correct. But in today's environment, it would need to be a much more practical discussion than just the ideas. Because of the challenge. And I don't know that it won't change again in another few years once we get past this particular phase in terms of where the challenge is. But it's clear to me, and I'll stop with this unless somebody has a comment or a question, that we do have the texts and we do have the material in our tradition to teach some very sophisticated things about what it means to be a for real Jew in the 21st century in the real world. We just have to now, and if it sounds like I'm being critical of the current administration, I am not. I am being critical of parents and families who do not want to invest what needs to be invested in order to teach this kind of stuff. When I got here in 2003, confirmation meant once a month. Once a month. My first year, I did something radical and insisted that they come twice a month and got major pushback. And the only reason it happened is because I was new and nobody wanted me to leave yet. I'm serious. By year 3, we were having confirmation once a week. Oh my God, a whole hour a week to teach adult Judaism. Now, I had them because I insisted on this. I taught 9th and 10th grade as a group over a 2-year cycle. Some of the parents here will remember that because I was hoping, to have more time and have more effort, more imparting in it. But it really can't be done. It can't be done in an hour a week. And especially if the families are living a very pediatric or golden book version of Jesus.
I mean, my great nephew goes to Israel for the summer and he hears what Ben-Gvir has to say about Palestinians.
Does everybody know what she's saying? Ben-Gvir is the ultranationalist who is very charismatic. Sadly, ultranationalists are often very charismatic.
It's true here.
It's true, absolutely, it's true here.
Yeah.
He is very articulate. He can be very funny. And so consequently, part of his rise was a result that various news programs were having him on all the time because it made good television. Even Simone can tell you, we were saying to ourselves, this is a huge mistake. But if you don't have anything to balance this with, except some version of the 10 Commandments, that probably even that has not been taught in a sophisticated manner. That's really what we're up against. And I don't know how serious the Jewish community is about, instead of just complaining, about actually trying to do something about this. I don't have all the answers, believe me. I just think I see the problem.
Do you have any books or references you could recommend for us as parents to read to share with our young adult children there?
Wow. I wish I had, there are plenty of books that are available that give basic information. Indeed, Rabbi Google is available on everybody's phone. If all you want, if all you want is information. Rita talked about checking out a book. Someday no one's going to know what that means. I have a whole library if anybody wants it. I'm happy to give it to you. 40 shelves of books. Nobody wants it because it's, thanks to Safaria, it's all available online, or almost all of it is available online. Rabbi's offices look like ghost towns where all these shelves from predecessors no longer are filled with anything. Okay, because it's all online. But my problem, the reason I'm hesitating is what we did requires, look, it took me 45, 50 minutes to set up the Rabbi Antonina's story, right? If we had just read it at the beginning, you would have all said, what the hell is he doing? What do we care about some magic tunnel and cave and other, what does this have to do with anything today? Because it requires a level of sophistication, which I think rabbis are capable of helping somebody with. But I couldn't just give you the packet and ask you to read it. Today now, if you want to read what's on page 10, Michael Walzer, Political Action and the Problem of Dirty Hands, you'll be able to read that now from a kind of perspective. Did I give you that, page 10? That'll give you some idea. He's a modern philosopher, Jewish philosopher, and he's writing about the issues that we were talking about. He goes on for another page and a half. And then I think I gave you Jonathan White, The Ethics of Political Alliance from the British Journal, Alan Levinson, The Cosmopolitan Jewish City, A Typology, Trudy Wright's Rosemary, America is Now Babylon. I think now you can read those things and they'll make sense to you. If I had just given them to you, they might make sense to you, but not the sense I want to do.
When
Yeah.
say Ohio passed a law saying you cannot teach anything on the college level that makes students uncomfortable.
Right.
No dirty hands.
Right.
US history is no dirty
All of this stuff. I once upon a time anticipated a whole career teaching in the university level, and thank God that didn't happen. Because I can't imagine how I would have done it, because I believe actually in the Socratic method, which is the whole point of the teacher is to challenge the students.
Yeah, right.
Certainly intellectually, but maybe even a little physically, that they have to be a little uncomfortable with the ideas so that they can figure out their own ideas. I'll give you an example of this I brought up in my confirmation class. I think it was the last one, it might have been the one before though. It was one of the last two. What some of you will remember, I required every student to be confirmed to write an essay on one of the things, one of the thinkers, one of the ideas that we learned in class, and then what they thought about it. One of the young ladies, and I just blanking out on her name, wrote on, what's his name? On Rubinstein. And what I would do each year, instead of a bulletin article, is I would take the one or two paragraphs from each one of the kids that I thought were the best and put it together. This is what this is. And I named the kid and what the kid said. Okay. The rabbi, the retired Rabbi Beth Abraham. Yeah, we all know that's Beth Abraham. South of here. Right? What was his name? Sandy, right. He picked it up. He read it in our bulletin and sent it to Richard Rubinstein. Sent the whole article. And I got an email from Richard Rubinstein. I still have it. I've never deleted this because, and I won't take the time to look for it, but what he said is, number one, I want to congratulate you on teaching this stuff. Most Jews in the American Jewish community won't teach anything I said. And then he said, you must have done a good job of teaching it because this young lady understands me better than most of my critics throughout the last several decades. Now, it's not that hard. His stuff is really pretty straightforward and not that hard to understand. It's very challenging. Okay, so I felt she must have picked up something that he saw that he thought was really the essence of what he was saying. It is possible to get this, to get subtlety across, to get these ideas, but it takes lots of time. And I don't know of a simple text that will allow you to access this material this way. Come on Wednesdays at noon.
Rabbi?
Now it's on her, yes.
It's
Tuesdays. I did it on Wednesdays, right? Is that, I taught it on Wednesdays.
Well, maybe this is not about this per se, but talking about alliances. At this point in time, does Israel have any true friends, or are they all just alliances?
Okay, so that's a great question. I believe that Israel talks about friends. Right, so let's keep that in mind. No, everybody always talks about friends rather than talking about friends. I think Israelis have come to understand that the relationship with the current American administration is an alliance and not anything like a true friendship. You will get differing opinions from Israelis about other administrations. The thing that is much more interesting to me, and every one of you here can voice an opinion on, is Israel's relationship with diaspora Jewry an alliance or friendship? Because this is a friendship that's a little tough right now. Are we willing, number one, are we unwilling to sacrifice for the relationship at all? Either as a friendship, in other words, we're done. Those are the kids that I was talking about for some of them. Peter Beinart is another example of that, if those of you mistakenly read him in the New York Times. Or are we willing to only sacrifice as an alliance because we see it as it's in our interest?
Is that generational though?
Well, it's certainly generational.
Definitely.
Certainly it's
But
generational.
I think it's more than.
But it's more than that, but it's certainly generational. And so if it's an alliance, let me give you an example of American Jews who see it as an alliance. I need a safe place to go just in case. Who wasn't raised on that? Right? All raised on that. Okay, that's fine. But that's alliance, that's not friendship. That's alliance, that's not family. It's another thing when you don't give up on your family, even if you're critical of your family. That's me. I think I demonstrated at the Brotherhood Brunch how to be critical of the current Israeli government. But it's still family. Don't walk away. You walk away from family, that's the friendship model, the way it was being defined. And I agree, what I just said works a whole lot better for people of my generation than it does of succeeding younger generations. So, again, if you want to put, Patty, are you the youngest person in the room? No, Tina, you must be the youngest person. What?
I said, yeah, probably.
But it's nobody's fault. I mean, nobody but us are available at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. I mean, I get that. But these conversations,
Life gets in the way.
right, but the conversations need to be had, not with this gentleman.
No.
It's hard. I don't want to say that it isn't, but this is the current generation's challenge. Every generation has a challenge, it's hard. You know, in the 70s, remember the big challenge was Soviet Jewry? And are we going to save the millions of Jews in the Soviet Union who managed to survive, who only know that they're Jewish because their identity card says Jew on it, even though they haven't the faintest idea what any of that means? Are we going to redeem them? Are we going to save them? That was the big challenge of the time.
Even the word Zionism turned all the way inside out.
It's been turned into a pejorative.
What, but that started in 1971.
1975.
Was it 75?
1975, the UN resolution, Zionism is racism.
That started then.
1975, you can, I mean, it's really, you can pinpoint it. But I insist on using the word for that reason. You remember the way I talked about it was liberal Zionism. But it's still Zionism. Currently, this week, the World Zionist Congress is going on in Jerusalem. We have our people there fighting for our understanding of Zionism, our understanding of Judaism. I think they're congruent. My friend Peter Noble once wrote an article called, I think it was called Liberal Judaism, maybe it said Reform Judaism, and Liberal Zionism are congruent. They share the same values, same liberal values. But we have to be not afraid to use the word, oh, we'll just give it up. To, what was that? Oh, to Ben Gvir, exactly. So the next week, we're going to look at something, again, a little different, still on point. We're going to be talking a little bit about the difference between means and ends. Okay? Thank you.
Yes.
Just setting it.